What's good? So, just making this video just as a general rebuttal to your last video. We had a little back and forth on Twitter. Then you made a video kind of like giving your take, just, kind of just bouncing back with mine. So, I kind of wrote up what I was going to say. So I'm just going to be kind of reading off that as I go. I'm going to start off by clarifying we do agree up to like a minute, like fully on the money up there. After that, just kind of tapers off. So I'm just going to start off by, just going over what we do agree on. So, a commodity is a product produced directly for exchange on a market rather than being produced directly for use. There's not a country on the planet that can fully sustain itself, just with the resources within its own borders. So, obviously, unfortunately, each country is forced to exchange with each other to obtain whichever resources they both need and lack. But that's kind of where we like part ways after that, because that's the exact reason that socialism can't exist in one country, and especially not while capitalism's like the hegemonic economic system on the planet. Socialism can only exist worldwide, or at minimum, with all of the most powerful countries on the planet implementing it simultaneously. So that brings us back to your implication that Vietnam had a socialist revolution, which I obviously disagree with, which is why I'm making the video. Vietnam was largely feudal, or at least agrarian, prior to the Viet Minh declaring Vietnam's independence from France in 1945. So if you understand historical materialism, you understand that socialism can't evolve out of feudalism. It can only evolve out of capitalism. The only thing that can evolve out of feudalism is capitalism, which will then develop productive forces to the degree necessary to support a socialist economy. But, this is really important, is you can't skip a step. And there's a great quote from Lenin, from Engels, that touches on what will happen if someone tries. So I'm just going to read that real quick. So this is from The Peasant War in Germany, chapter 6, again, Friedrich Engels. So it says, "The worst thing that can befall a leader of an extreme party is to be compelled to take over a government in an epoch when the movement is not yet ripe for the domination of the class which he represents and for the realization of the measures which that domination would imply. What he can do depends not upon his will, but upon the sharpness of the clash of interests between the various classes and upon the degree of development of the material means of existence, the relations of production and means of communication upon which the clash of interests of the classes is based every time. What he ought to do, what his party demands of him, again, depends not upon him or upon the degree of development of the class struggle and its conditions. He is bound to his doctrines and the demands hitherto propounded, which do not emanate from the interrelations of the social classes at a given moment, or from the more or less accidental level of relations of production and means of communication, but from his more or less penetrating insight into the general result of the social and political movement. Thus, he necessarily finds himself in a dilemma. What he can do is, in contrast to all his actions as hitherto practiced, to all his principles, and to the present interests of his party. What he ought to do cannot be achieved. In a word, he is compelled to represent not his party or his class, but the class for whom conditions are ripe for domination. In the interests of the movement itself, he is compelled to defend the interests of an alien class and to feed his own class with phrases and promises with the assertion that the interests of that alien class are their own interests. Whoever puts himself in this awkward position is irrevocably lost." So again, Friedrich Engels. I'll put the Marxist.org link to that one in the bottom. But to say all that, that's why I responded to your tweet saying that Vietnam had a bourgeois revolution, not a socialist revolution, since it established a state capitalist economic system rather than a socialist one. How do we know that? Because Vietnam had an economic system based on state ownership of the means of production and production for profit, rather than common ownership of the means of production and production for use. A couple other minor gripes I had were, one, that you mentioned an economic plan, which I think would need to exist under socialism, but they won't be anything like the 5 and 10 year plans of the USSR, China, etc. They'd be way more localized and decentralized with a focus on comfortably sustaining the citizens of a given area, rather than being focused on growth and competition on the world market. obviously there's not going to be markets. So yeah. Number two, minor gripe is that you mentioned stages of socialism at the end. And, since you're in ML, I didn't know if you're using the term stages in the same way I would. So just to clarify from my end, there's going to be capitalism, then socialism / communism / the free association of producers, whatever you want to call it. But Marx and Engels use the terms socialism and communism interchangeably. In Critique of the Gotha Program, Marx mentions a first and higher phase of communism, with the first phase being preceded by the final phase of capitalism, which would be the dictatorship of the proletariat. He mentions the possibility of the first phase needing labor vouchers, which I don't really see as being necessary at this point. But it's really important to clarify that neither phase of communism will have any of the core features of capitalism or any of the other market-based modes of production. And those features include stuff like private property, which includes state property, because something being state property doesn't by virtue make it common property. Commodities, money, classes, wages, states, political leaders, and last one, extremely important, countries. So Engels lays most of that out in Principles of Communism, which is like 3 pages. And the rest, I think in Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific, I think that's the one he says like the political leaders went in. There might be another one, but like most of that is laid out like for sure in Principles of Communism. But yeah, to circle back to my main point, I'm not saying that Vietnam had to abolish commodity production. What I'm saying is that Vietnam hadn't gone through a capitalist phase yet, so it would have been impossible for them to have a socialist revolution. So to call the revolution socialist rather than bourgeois doesn't make sense. Done.